And then what we'll do is about a week later have you turn the proposal to me, and then I'll get that back to you the next class and try and answer any questions. For these projects, the few pieces of advice I would give: first of all, find something that interests you. I know that can sometimes be a challenge. But for the project, I think it makes it a lot easier when you have something that you have some, at least, basic spark about. It helps you gain a voice as you're talking about the data and describing the data and describing your results. So that's always a nice thing to do. I'm extremely open-minded about your project. As I said, I'm not looking necessarily for groundbreaking research. I had a project a few years ago where a group did how did professors do on Rate My Professor, where they tried to base it upon what was, how long had the professor been teaching at Towson, were they full-time or part-time, what was their helpfulness score and things like that on Rate My Professor. And while it sounded like a silly little project, and some people are like, well, you're doing a project on Rate My Professor for your stats class? It was a good project. You know, they went through and did the things that I suggested that they do in terms of they described to me the data, they told me a story about the data. Okay? And that was great. You know, it was a good little project that, you know, demonstrated to me that they knew their statistics and they had a little bit of fun with it. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I tell the story about when I was, again, in North Carolina teaching this class. I had a very small class. I had 16 students, 4 groups of 4. And so I said, why don't I have you describe to me your project? So instead of writing out a proposal, they actually went around the classroom and we talked about each group's project. And so the first group said to me, we want to do a project on, what was the first group? The first group was drinking on campus. So they wanted to know, how many drinks in an average week do students have? And we talked about it. It's like, okay, that's fine. That's a good project. Next group says, we want to study binge drinking. Like, well, I'm not quite sure what the difference is. And actually, the difference between the two is the drinking group was studying drinking on campus among students. The binge drinking was actually looking at the difference in binge drinking rates based upon colleges. So they looked at ECON in North Carolina. They looked at like UNC and Duke and NC State and different colleges in the state of North Carolina and said, what was the difference in their binge drinking rates among the various campuses? So what contributed to some colleges being big party schools, so like what would contribute here in the state of Maryland, Frostburg, versus why were some schools not party schools? So like in Maryland, UMBC probably would fit that bill. So what is the difference between them? And that was perfectly fine. Actually, that was a pretty good project. So I'm like, okay, so like drinking, binge drinking. So the next group comes up, and I think this class was playing this. They were a little bit, they were sneaky. Next group says, we want to study marijuana usage on campus. I personally think they wanted to get hands-on research on this topic. That was sort of my opinion of them, and from their project, yeah. But they were going to study, you know, gain their, you know, how much do students smoke per week or something like that. I'm like, well, I'm a little bit concerned about your data. How reliable is your data there? Will students forget their data? But I said, that's fine. That's fine. So they did that. And so the last group says, we want to do porn. And I'm being serious with the next question that I asked. I asked, so where are you going to get data on porn? And the scarier part was they actually had an answer to that question. They're like, we have someone in our group who works in an adult industry. Like, okay, we don't need to ask. But they actually were able to get data on the amount that people spend on porn. I'm like, okay, Sure, you can go for it. So if I allow drinking, drug use, and porn to be topics, I'm pretty open-minded. As long as you can get data, that's the biggest thing to me. If you can get data, you can go for it. Yeah, so that's the key. So what I want you to think about over the break, and you might want to, I'm not saying you necessarily need to form groups, but if you know people in the class that you want to work with already, you might want to start talking about what would be some potential topics. Then, as I said, as we get into the project, we'll talk a little bit more about what I'm looking for. I hope to give you at least the last 2 days, if not the last 3 days of class to work on the project. I also hopefully will try to give you 1 day to collect data. I know for groups that are doing surveys, that will take a little bit of time. For other groups, that's not as much of an issue, but could be. So that's the plan of attack. So what we'll do is, as I said, when we get back from break, we'll form groups. About a week later, I'll ask for your project ideas, and then at some point I'll give you some time to do some other things. So enjoy your spring break. Have a good time. Don't kill too many brain cells, at least, while you're on it. If you're going to Florida, say hi to my parents and all that. So have a good time, and I will see you all on, well, sometime after spring break, because I don't know when.